I stepped out of the car in the dimming light, my hands still shaking after a tense meeting with the board of directors. Sweat beaded on my shirt's back, not because of work pressure, but because the vague feeling that had haunted me all week was slowly becoming a reality. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The neighbors' kids had parked their cars all over the street, forcing me to park several houses down. I sighed, slammed the car door shut, and walked slowly down the tree-lined path. As I neared home, I saw Alyssa's familiar SUV, my wife's sister, blocking the entrance, like a careless symbol of possession. Every time she showed up, I couldn't shake the discomfort. Her face always wore a look of contempt for me, though I'd never done anything wrong to her. As I passed the empty garbage bin on the sidewalk, I bent down to drag it to the side of the house, out of habit. My left hand gripped the car keys tightly, while my right hand stayed in my pocket, feeling my heartbeat irregularly. Just as I was about to pass through the back door, a giggle from the living room, heard through the sliding glass door, made me stop. It was Alyssa's voice, followed by my wife's voice. "Hey, I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I'm not that kind of person." But then the next sentence froze me to the core. "I slept with Kyle 3 times this week, and I don't regret it." Kyle. The name hit me like a knife to the chest. Her ex-boyfriend, the one who disappeared from this town 7 years ago, the one I thought was long gone from her life. I stood still, my heart breaking with each irregular beat. Haley continued, her voice low but clear, as if she were considering her next move. "I'm going to talk to a lawyer. In California, divorce means splitting assets. I deserve half." I swallowed hard, the bitter taste rising in my throat. This house, my savings, the small business I'd built after 10 years of nonstop work, she thought she could just sign a few papers and take half of my life? I couldn't listen any longer. I backed away toward the gate, feeling like I had just had my soul stolen. Everything I had trusted, everything I had worked so hard to build, was now just a pile of material goods in her eyes. I opened the car door, sat in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel until they turned white. My mind was empty, but my emotions screamed. Anger, humiliation, and an indescribable pain. Haley and I got married 4 years ago when I was 33 and she was 28. Right after the wedding, she quit her job to focus on the family. I went along with it, hiring a housekeeper 3 times a week, paying for food, travel, clothes, everything. Every month, I transferred a few $1,000s into our joint account, thinking simply, what's mine is yours. Now, I feel incredibly stupid. We didn't have kids. She said she wasn't ready, but now looking back, maybe Haley was never ready for anything except taking over the life I'd worked so hard to build. I once thought the worst thing was betrayal, but the real pain came from realizing that the woman I had built a home with was secretly plotting to tear it all down and then demand half. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, and stared at the account numbers I had spent my whole life saving. My heart felt like a stone sinking. Haley hadn't hired a lawyer yet. I still had time. Time to disappear from her life before she could make her move. I drove through the empty streets of the old neighborhood, the streetlights flickering on the car windows like fragments of memories passing through my mind. How long had it been since I last returned to East Phoenix? 10 years? Maybe more? The house where I grew up still stood at the end of the hill, its gray roof and the wooden gate bent by time. But the person I wanted to see wasn't there anymore. No one was waiting for me. No one was left in the kitchen with the smell of baked apples. My mother passed away from cancer when I was just 14. My father, a former aerospace engineer, struggled to raise me with calloused hands and a heart drained by loss. He never complained, just worked, and worked, as if stopping would break him under the weight of memories of her. I remember one night when I asked him why Mom had to die, he just hugged me and said, "You need to learn how to stand on your own when no one is there to hold you up." Those words have stayed with me like an invisible tattoo on my soul. My dad passed away when I was 25, after a car accident with a drunk driver on Highway 87. His pickup was hit from the side, flipping 3 times before landing in a ditch. They said he died instantly. I never got to say goodbye. After the funeral, the family lawyer called me into his office and placed a stack of documents on the table, Inside were investment contracts, savings accounts, property papers, and the will. I was stunned. My dad quietly left me nearly $1,800,000. All accumulated assets, stocks, and investment returns from the company he worked for before retiring early due to heart disease. I used part of it to start a small business providing mechanical equipment for construction projects, and the rest was invested long-term, based on advice from an old friend of my dad. Life started to stabilize until Haley came into the picture. We met at a business seminar. She worked PR for a natural cosmetics company. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that made you forget what you were saying. Haley was smart, stylish, and knew how to make me feel admired. She wasn't like the girls I'd met before, or at least that's what I thought at the time. When she moved in with me after 6 months of dating, everything felt like it was happening too fast. But love, once it sweeps you off your feet, doesn't leave room for second thoughts. We married a year later on my 34th birthday. I didn't ask her to sign a prenuptial agreement. I told her with all my trust, everything I have is yours. Now looking back, I can't understand how I was so blind. There were little things I ignored back then. Once, when I said I wanted to invest more in my company, Haley suggested we buy a new car first. You should drive something that matches your success. Another time, when I asked if she wanted to go back to work, she smiled and said, "You make enough for both of us." At first, I thought it was just pampering, but in reality, I had become the only one carrying the weight of everything, while she stood by the sidelines and enjoyed. I didn't realize those sweet words were slowly suffocating my autonomy. Now, when I think about it, there was one time when Alyssa, Haley's sister, was drunk at a birthday party. She told me, "My sister always knows how to pick the right guy to take the shortcut to success." I thought it was a terrible joke. I smiled awkwardly and forgot about it. Now that sentence comes back like a harsh knock on my memory. I turned on the radio, but the music couldn't drown out the screaming rising in my chest. I once believed that love was enough. I thought if I was kind and sincere, I'd receive the same in return. I was wrong. In the quiet of the night, as the whole city slept, I silently opened my laptop. The offshore bank account I had set up to protect my inheritance was still active. I typed in the numbers as if rewriting my own fate. Haley still didn't know that I had begun to regain control. She thought I would collapse. She was wrong. Once, I let my heart lead and lost everything. This time, I would let my mind take charge. And I would turn that betrayal into the final and most expensive lesson of my life. It took me 3 days to prepare everything. Without a word, without a message, I disappeared from Haley's life one Monday morning. She thought I was off on business in Chicago. A last-minute meeting I had fabricated, supported by fake emails and an internal flight schedule that only senior managers like me could arrange. In reality, I was leaving Arizona, and if everything went according to plan, I'd be leaving my old life behind. 2 weeks earlier, I had quietly sold the black Mustang Haley had always flaunted as my symbol of success. I traded it for a 2006 GMC Sierra, a truck with a good engine but scratched and faded by the desert sun. Exactly the kind of vehicle no one would care about if they saw it parked on the side of the road. I liquidated some smaller assets, withdrew nearly all of my remaining savings, including the investment money from my private stock portfolio, the only thing not jointly held with Haley. We had a joint account, but most of the inheritance from my father was kept separate, thanks to the caution of the lawyer who handled the will. That money, I moved entirely into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands with the discreet help of an old financial advisor. In just 36 hours after leaving home, I canceled all my credit cards, erased all banking logins from my phone, and changed all passwords related to my personal accounts. I activated a new phone with a prepaid SIM, and my old phone was thrown into the Colorado River one misty morning, so cold that my hands went numb as I dropped it into the water. Destination? Not Montana, like in the movies or the inspirational stories people like to share. I chose a place near the Idaho border, a remote area called Elk Hollow, where there are only farms stretching for hundreds of acres and so few residents that even Google Maps loses signal when I veer off the highway a few miles. The first farm I stopped at was Stonebrook Acres, owned by an elderly couple, Rick and Margot Talbot. I met them while filling up at the only gas station within a 15-mile radius. Rick was tall, with silver hair falling beneath his cowboy hat and piercing blue eyes. He struck up a conversation after noticing I was filling up without using a card. "Been a while since I saw someone use cash," he said in a deep, slow voice like pine sap dripping. I replied with a smile, "I'm looking for work. Anything that can keep me going. Who knows, maybe you need a hand." He sized me up from head to toe, pausing at my dusty boots and worn jacket. After a few seconds of silence, he nodded slightly. "Hop in. My place is about 10 minutes away." On the way to the farm, I shared part of the truth, that I used to manage operations, but after a personal setback, I wanted to find a different way of living. I didn't mention Haley, didn't mention money. The fewer people knew, the better. Stonebrook Acres spanned nearly 1,200 acres, with about 300 cattle, a few sheep, and an apple orchard stretching to the base of a hill. Not big enough to need many hands, but enough to make it difficult for two elderly people to manage alone. I was assigned a small wooden cabin behind the livestock pens, a single bed, a small gas stove, a basic bathroom, and a single window facing the windy hillside. Nothing luxurious, but peaceful enough to soothe my soul after days of running. That first night, I had stew with Margot, a woman in her 60s whose hands still held the strength to carry pot after pot of hot food from the stove. She didn't ask much, only telling me, "Everyone here has a past. But when you work together, the present is enough." I nodded. I didn't know how long I would stay here. I had just stepped out of the comfortable hell called marriage, and if I had to start over with my hands in the dirt instead of typing on a keyboard, I was ready. As night fell, I lay on the bed that was as hard as wood and listened to the insects chirping, mixed with the distant sound of cows bellowing. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. No nightmares. No ghosts of the woman who once called me her husband. Dawn in Elk Hollow didn't come with car horns or the buzzing of phones in the ear. Only the wind blowing through the grassy hills and the sound of cattle calling each other from afar. I woke before the sun, washed my face with cold water from the hand pump, pulled the worn flannel shirt over my head, and stepped outside. The first job Rick gave me was cleaning the southern pen. It had been nearly abandoned because Rick and Margot were too old to clean the cow manure every week. I didn't complain. With a shovel in hand, I stomped on the dry, clumpy earth, the pungent smell rising with each scoop. Each time I swung the shovel, sweat poured down my back, soaking my shirt. I had once signed contracts worth millions with just a handshake. Now, every hour was a battle of physical endurance, but I had never felt so real. At noon, Margot brought me a sandwich and some iced tea. She placed it on the pen's windowsill, then sat on a wooden chair, watching me with a curious yet satisfied look. "You know, Leo," she said, "Rick's not the type to open up easily, but yesterday, he told me it's been a long time since he's seen someone work without complaining like you." I smiled, wiping my hands on my pants. I guess everyone has a reason to want to start over. I didn't come here to run away. I came here to learn how to survive. She nodded. Surviving is the first step, but living with value is what's important. The following weeks passed in a haze of exhaustion and gentle silence. I rebuilt the fence along the northern side, dug drainage ditches, and learned how to separate calves from their mothers for vaccinations. My hands, once accustomed to typing and signing contracts, were now rough and scarred. My nails were always covered in mud, and the smell of burnt charcoal lingered on my skin, but every scratch was a part of me finding myself again. Rick didn't speak much, but he started to trust me. One afternoon, while we were hammering fence posts, he asked, "What did you do in Phoenix before you came here?" I paused for a few seconds before answering, "Ran a small company, then married the wrong person." He snorted, "Well, that second part sounds worse." I laughed. Can't argue with that. At night, I sat on the cabin porch, watching the stars fill the sky. In the city, the lights made me forget that the sky could breathe. I turned on my old computer, using the weak Wi-Fi signal from the main house to check my email. Only a few messages from the offshore bank confirming that my account was stable. Not a single line from Haley. Maybe she had called the police, maybe not, but at this point, I didn't care. One day, Rick mentioned a herd of calves had wandered to the western edge of the farm near the trail leading into the woods. He handed me a rifle and said, "You won't need it, but in the woods, there are some things you don't take lightly." I rode alone through the century-old pines, following a small creek. By the time I found the calves, the sky was dimming. I herded them back, my heart racing with excitement, because for the first time, I felt truly useful to someone, without money or fame. When I returned to the pen, Rick was waiting at the door. He didn't say anything, just gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder. His eyes told me everything I needed to know. I had earned his respect. Slowly, the neighbors began asking Rick about the city guy helping out. Margot told me that Rick had said, "He works like he's making up for something with the whole world." I didn't deny it. Maybe that was true. One early July morning, while I was giving water to the cattle on the eastern side of the forest, Rick drove up in his old Jeep, stopping a few meters away before calling out to me, "Someone just came back from Colorado. You should come back for lunch. Margot's making roast beef." I wiped my forehead, nodded, then climbed into the truck, my stomach growling after 4 hours of work under the sun. When we arrived at the yard, I almost dropped my toolbox when I saw a shiny white SUV parked in front of the main house. The door opened, and out stepped a woman in her late 20s with dark red hair tied neatly, tall and slender in a plaid shirt and tight jeans. Her eyes were cold, like a frozen lake, staring straight at me without blinking. "I'm Caitlin," she said quickly, her voice sharp. "You're Leo, right? The one staying with my parents?" I stood up straight and nodded. "Yes, I've been working here for almost 3 months. So my dad hired some stranger without any background and didn't tell me?" Her gaze was sharper than a razor. Maybe he trusts what he sees with his own eyes more than paperwork. My words seemed to hit her lightly, making her lips press together. Without saying another word, she walked into the house, leaving me with the faint scent of her perfume in the wind and a strange feeling growing in my chest. Rick then just laughed when he saw the look of confusion on my face. "The girl just finished her veterinary degree in Fort Collins. She's used to living among theories and ideals. If you stick around, she'll get used to it." Stick around was an understatement. Over the next 4 days, Caitlin seemed like a little radar with a camera, always showing up at the exact moments when I was most clumsy, spilling the feed, letting water overflow the trough, or forgetting to lock the goat pen. Every time there was that skeptical gaze, her words not needing to be sharp but cold enough to make my skin crawl. "Weren't you running some company back in the city? It's kind of strange that you don't know how to tell a pregnant cow from a calf that hasn't been weaned yet." I sighed. I know how to manage people, not cows, but I learned quickly. Let's hope so, because cows don't like being managed like a startup. That made Rick almost choke on his tea. But then one late afternoon, as I was inspecting the fence along the creek at the edge of the woods, I heard the pounding of hooves. Reflexively, I turned around and saw Caitlin riding toward me, panic written all over her face. "There are strangers in the woods," she yelled as she neared. "I just saw 3 guys lurking around the bathing pond. One of them had a knife." I didn't ask anything further. I mounted, followed her, rifle on my back. When we reached the area near the stone pond, Caitlin stopped and pointed. "They disappeared behind those pines." I dismounted, crawled through the brush, and followed the footprints. Just as she had said, 3 figures were standing several paces from the water, looking around as if lurking. One of them was crouched, tying his shoes, while another was holding binoculars. I raised my rifle, fired a shot that struck a tree just beside one of their heads. "Down on the ground, hands behind your head," I yelled. All 3 dropped immediately, no resistance. I kept my rifle aimed at them, glanced back at Caitlin, who was hiding behind a rock. Her eyes were wide with shock, but when I gave her a signal of safety, she ran towards me, panting. "How did you know to do that?" she asked. "City life taught me a lot, but survival comes from places like this." We tied the 3 strangers' hands and took them back to the house, where Rick called the local police. The men were detained for trespassing and illegal possession of weapons. But after that night, Caitlin's gaze towards me had changed. She was no longer sharp, no longer suspicious of me. Instead, there was a quiet gaze, mixed with some consideration, some curiosity. The next morning, as I was fixing the horse pen gate, she came up to me, holding a cup of coffee, her voice soft. "I've never met anyone like you. Honestly, I can't figure out what kind of person you are." I looked up and smiled. Maybe that's a good thing, because sometimes not understanding makes people want to know more. She didn't say anything, just placed the coffee cup on the step beside me and turned away. But her steps were slower. I watched her walk away, suddenly realizing, for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Haley. I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about something else. A new beginning. Not to run away, but maybe because someone wanted to hold on. After the incident at the bathing pond, Caitlin no longer kept a complete distance from me. She started to invite me to breakfast with the family, occasionally bringing cookies to the cattle pen under the pretext of checking their digestion after the vaccine shots. I understood those signs, but I also knew she was battling herself. Caitlin wasn't easy to let anyone into her safe space. Born and raised in a family with an agricultural background, well-educated with a PhD before hitting 30, she had every reason to be cautious of a nobody like me, especially since I had no records, no references, no clear background. So even though I could feel the irregular beat whenever our eyes met, I kept my distance. I didn't want to make her feel cornered. I wasn't here to take anything from anyone. I just wanted to live for myself. Yet, that peace wouldn't last long. One weekend afternoon, as I was helping Rick fix the hay feeder on the west side of the farm, a new silver pickup truck pulled up. On the truck door was the logo of a cattle ranch called Glendale Ridge. The man who stepped out was blonde, with a neatly trimmed goatee, shirt tucked into jeans, and a silver belt buckle. The kind of man around here that women easily swoon over. He walked straight into the house, carrying a big bouquet of flowers and a gift box with a red bow. Rick raised an eyebrow and muttered, "Another one." I didn't need to ask to know, Caitlin. Just as I had guessed. That night, as I was changing the water for the horses, Caitlin walked by with a bouquet of roses that I knew she didn't buy herself. When she saw me, she paused, her eyes a bit awkward, but quickly covered it with a casual demeanor. "Have you ever heard of Brent Murdoch?" she asked. I looked up, shrugged. The name sounds familiar, must be the owner of Glendale Ridge? Yeah. He's the son of the owner. He just came back to Elk Hollow after 2 years working in Wyoming. Really, he must be quite successful. She looked at me closely, as if waiting for a reaction. I just kept working, not giving anything away. After a few seconds of silence, she spoke again. "He invited me to dinner at the new restaurant in town." I nodded. "Enjoy." Caitlin stood still for a moment, then turned and walked away. I could still hear her boots tapping on the ground, clearly, until the sound faded behind the apple trees. I won't deny, a twinge of pain rose inside me. But I didn't blame her. I was a hired hand, living in a cabin beside the horse pens, with a past like a misty gray zone no one knew about. Brent, on the other hand, was local, reputable, wealthy. Caitlin's choice, if it was him, would make perfect sense. What I didn't expect, though, was that she would return so soon that night. When I was polishing the saddle inside the barn, headlights illuminated the sandy yard. Caitlin stepped out of the truck, no longer holding the bouquet. Her face was makeup-free, wearing wrinkled jeans and looking frustrated. Hale spent the whole dinner talking about breeding cattle and meat distribution chains, like I was a business partner, not a woman, she said. I didn't respond. She came closer, standing just an arm's length away from me. "I hate how you don't get jealous. I hate how you act like you don't care." I set the cloth down, looking up at her. "Caitlin, I'm not the kind of person who owns someone just with a few glances. If you choose someone, that's your right. I'm not here to take what's not mine." Her eyes darkened, her chest rising and falling, but this time it wasn't due to anger. It was something deeper, more complicated. She bit her lip and then quietly said, "The thing is, I'm not sure I want to belong to anyone else." Then she turned away, not waiting for a reply. I stood there for a long time, my hand still on the cold leather saddle, my chest feeling like there was a weight pressing on it, but it wasn't exactly heavy. That feeling? It felt very much like hope. The next few days, Caitlin didn't mention Brent. She didn't mention that night either, but every morning she'd leave a black coffee on the kitchen counter. No sugar, just the way I liked it. A small detail, but I understood. There were feelings, even if I couldn't name them yet, quietly existing between us. I didn't know where the future would lead, but right now, one thing. For love to grow, it needed patience and respect. And I would let it grow the same way I built each fence around the fields. Not rushing, not retreating, not forcing, just quietly being there every day when she needed me. Autumn came and the trees around Elk Hollow slowly turned to gold, then bright brown. The morning air had the cold taste of early winter, with the smell of dry grass and wood smoke lingering in the wind. I kept working steadily, but my mind was getting busier, not just with fences, troughs, or vaccination schedules for the cattle. I was preparing for something bigger, a quiet but certain step. After the incident at the pond and the brief tension that followed, Caitlin and I developed an unspoken bond. We didn't kiss, we didn't say I love you, but she always sat next to me at dinner, always found excuses to stop by where I was working, and asked questions that didn't really need answering. Which do you think is smarter, cows or horses? Have you ever imagined living here forever? I answered with smiles, a few shrugs, and sometimes a question in return. Among those seemingly trivial conversations, something was silently growing. Once, when she mentioned wanting to open a mobile vet clinic because there were no professional facilities within a 50-mile radius, I took note immediately. She didn't say much, but I understood that budget was the issue. The Talbot farm wasn't exactly thriving. Rick had been blunt about how they kept the farm afloat, selling hay and a contract with 2 restaurant chains for meat supply. So I started acting, quietly. I reached out to my financial advisor in Houston, where I'd set up the offshore account. We created a shell company, Hollow Creek Community Trust, sounding like a non-profit aimed at community projects. I sent Caitlin an email from a fake address, suggesting she apply for funding for the vet clinic. She took a few days to put together a business plan, estimate costs, and when she received the email saying her application had been approved, her eyes lit up like she had just touched a dream. I can't believe it. They approved a loan for $70,000 at 2% interest with no collateral required. They must believe in your potential. I don't know who helped me get connected to them, but if I find out, I'll thank them with both hands. I just smiled, keeping that secret to myself. I didn't want her to feel indebted. I wanted her to stand on her own 2 feet, just like I had to rebuild from nothing. While Caitlin was busy ordering the van, medical equipment, and working on the licensing paperwork, I quietly kept an eye on another, much more important transaction. The Weatherstone farm was located south of the valley, covering nearly 1,800 acres. It had once been owned by Nolan Reed, a notorious rancher in the county. Reed had been arrested 3 months ago for being involved in an illegal cattle trade ring. His entire estate was seized by the bank. I didn't hesitate. Through a lawyer, I bought the entire land, using the corporate name Canyon Blue Enterprises to keep my identity hidden. I paid $400,000 up front, with the rest mortgaged through a commercial bank in Denver. Within 2 weeks, I was officially the new owner. Only one person knew about it, Rick. I took him to see the farm one cold morning, when Caitlin was in town. "What are you planning to do with this place?" he asked, his eyes scanning the overgrown fields and the dilapidated barns. "Rebuild it, but not alone." I pointed to the wooden sign I had just put up, with the newly carved words, "Double C Ranch." Rick raised an eyebrow. "Carson and Caitlin?" I nodded. "She doesn't know yet, but I'll ask her soon, if she agrees to be a co-owner with me." He stared at me for a long time, then gave my shoulder a light pat. "If she says no, then she's crazy." I laughed, but my heart was pounding like a drum. I wasn't sure if Caitlin would agree. She was strong, independent, and not the kind of person to jump into any plan without deciding for herself. But I trusted the timing, the sincerity, and what we were building together. In my coat pocket, I had a small velvet box, dark blue, with a ring I had custom made at the only jewelry store in the area. The ring was engraved with two intertwined initials, C and C. I'd never knelt for anyone before, but if the moment came, I wouldn't hesitate. Not to ask for permission to love, but to propose starting a new life together. That afternoon, the Montana sky stretched high, the sunlight pouring like honey over the golden brown grass. I texted Caitlin to come out to the car with the excuse of wanting to show her something special. She furrowed her brow but got in, more curious than skeptical. I took the wheel, my heart heavy like something was on the brink of breaking inside me. The car turned off the main road, passing old, run-down fields and rotting fences. The dirt road led to Weatherstone Farm, now with a new sign, Double C Ranch, hand-carved, white letters on a black background. Double C? Caitlin asked, her eyes fixed on the sign. Carson and Caitlin, I answered. What do you think of the name? She turned to me, her lips pressed together, then gently asked, What are you doing here? I want you to see everything before you answer. The main house had been repainted, the window frames replaced, the bright red roof standing out against the surrounding landscape. I stopped the car in front of the porch, got out first and opened the door for her. Caitlin stepped out slowly, her eyes never leaving the house. I led her along the stone path, past the backyard where I had planted lavender and wild apple trees. She remained silent until I opened the double doors to the kitchen. The kitchen was bright with white ceramic tile, walnut wood cabinets, and an L-shaped countertop with a copper faucet. Every detail was a replica of her parents' kitchen. I had asked Rick and Margot for suggestions on every item, every corner. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, her hand resting on the edge of the counter, her voice trembling slightly. At what do I do all of this? I nodded. Not for the farm, not for me, but for you, because I want this place to be home, a real home. Then I pulled a small box from my jacket pocket and opened it. A simple round diamond set on a white gold band glinted in the fading light. Caitlin Talbot, if you agree, I want you to be the one to help me rewrite it all. No past, no debts, just the future and a choice made freely. Do you want to be the one to build this ranch with me? She didn't answer immediately. Tears streamed down her face, rolling down her cheeks and falling to the floor. A second later, she laughed through her tears, reached her hand out and said, Do you have 2 shovels by any chance? I think we need to plant some more flowers. I knelt on one knee, placing the ring on her finger. My heart exploded, but my face only dared to hold a smile, just enough. The wedding was held right at Double C Ranch. The backyard was covered with a white tarp, tables made from rough pine wood draped with lace tablecloths, wildflowers and recycled glass jars. Margot made the wedding cake and Rick carved the name tags so guests could find their seats. Sam, Rick's longtime manager, escorted Caitlin down the aisle, his eyes filled with both pride and emotion. When the elderly pastor asked, Do you agree to love, honor, and live your life with the man beside you? Caitlin squeezed my hand and replied, I've never been more sure than I am right now. Cheers erupted as I kissed her. No one mentioned the past. No whispered rumors about my old life. Only warm gazes from those I had served meals to, built fences for, patched roofs with. After the wedding, we moved into Double C Ranch. The next day, I gathered both Rick and Sam. I want to merge the 2 ranches, use the new brand, but the condition is, profits will be split 50/50 with the Talbot family. Rick, you'll continue running the northern section as you have. Sam will be the general manager. Rick initially objected. This ranch is twice the size of mine, it's not fair. I interrupted. Fairness isn't in the land. It's in who taught me how to start over. Sam, usually quiet, just nodded and extended his hand. If you go back on your word, I'll throw you off your horse. We shook hands under the early morning sun. No contract, no lawyers, just trust. A month later, Caitlin officially launched her mobile veterinary clinic. The white van was parked under the porch with the words, Talbot Animal Care, from Huff to Heart, printed on the side. She traveled across the area, treating sick calves, injured horses, and always made it back just in time for dinner. She never asked about the loan again. As for me, every time I saw her return with her hair wild from the wind and hands covered in dirt, I knew no one needed to know the truth behind it. The only thing I needed to hold on to was that smile. And I would hold on to it until my last breath. I never thought I'd return to Arizona, but to close the past, there are some doors you must close with your own hands. Before leaving, I told Caitlin I needed a few days to close an old chapter. She didn't ask more. She just hugged me tightly the morning I left for the car, saying, "Don't let her take anything else from you, not even your peace." I boarded the flight to Phoenix with a strange sense of unfamiliarity. The city that I once planned to build a family in now only held the dust of memories, covering the buildings I once thought I would be tied to for life. The one who greeted me at the airport was Jordan, my best friend from college, the only one who knew the whole truth about the divorce I had been running from. "You look 10 times better than when you left here," Jordan said as I tossed my suitcase onto the back seat. "I'm alive again," I replied. We didn't waste much time planning. I had Jordan represent me and approach Janice. I didn't want to see her again. Not because of fear or resentment, but because I didn't want those eyes, the ones that once made me trust her, to make me hesitate again. I prepared a straightforward offer, $50,000 in exchange for her signature on the divorce papers and complete freedom. No disputes, no lawsuits, no need to see each other again. If she refused, she would get nothing, and with her current empty financial records, I knew it was a gamble she wouldn't dare take. 2 days later, Jordan called me from the parking lot of the coffee shop where they had met. She showed up late, but she came. Dark circles under her eyes, wearing old clothes, cheap makeup. She didn't look like the person who once mocked you about class. "What's the situation?" At first, she acted surprised, then pretended to be angry. But when I mentioned the money, she didn't ask any more questions, just asked, "When will I get the money?" I sighed. "Has she signed?" "He has. The lawyer will have the paperwork ready this afternoon. I've also prepared a check for $10,000. The rest will be transferred in 60 days as planned." I hung up. I didn't feel relieved. It felt like I had just severed a rope that once tied me between a dream and a nightmare. She hadn't loved me for a long time. Maybe she never had. But the formalization of a lie still stirred something inside me. I left the city that afternoon. The flight back to Montana felt like it was carrying a new man, one who was no longer bound, no longer haunted by what he had lost. I landed in the crisp chill of early winter. The sky above Elk Hollow was lower than usual, as if it wanted to pull me closer to the place that truly belonged to me. As the car turned onto the dirt path leading to Double C Ranch, I saw Caitlin standing by the fence, her hand resting on her belly, now clearly noticeable beneath her thick sweater. She smiled when she saw the car stop. "You're 4 hours late." Because on the plane I was thinking of names for our baby. She tilted her head, her eyes bright. "What if it's a girl? Then she'll be the only one allowed to bring horses into the house without me complaining." She burst out laughing, then slowly walked toward me. I pulled her into my arms, my hand resting on her belly. A tiny life was growing under the roof that bore both our names. Nothing in this life made me doubt the choice I had made. In the months that followed, life passed in simple yet meaningful routines. I continued developing Double C Ranch, officially merging the land of Talbert Farm, sharing profits 50/50 as promised. Rick, though now 65, still rode out every morning to check the hay and often grumbled about the dropping beef prices, as if it were some global conspiracy. Sam was officially appointed as the operations manager. He didn't say thank you, just shook my hand and half-jokingly, half-seriously said, "Being the boss means drinking cold coffee every morning. Are you ready?" I was ready, more than ever before. As for Caitlin, not only had she become a respected veterinarian in the area, but she was also the one who kept the fire alive for everything I had worked so hard to build. She didn't need me to do anything for her, but she was always there by my side, whether it was for something big or small, whether it was helping a mare give birth to a foal or arguing over which chicken coop laid more eggs. I once thought happiness was a luxury, but it turns out it's simply living with the person who makes you want to come home every day and waking up beside them ready to start over. Every morning, every season, every new chapter of life. I closed an old chapter with clarity and opened a new one with true love. And this time, I didn't need to disappear to be free. I was free right where I stood. From a man who had lost everything due to trust in a fake marriage, Leo rebuilt his life with his own hands and a steadfast heart. He didn't just regain his self-worth, he also found a true partner in life, Caitlin, the woman who stood beside him in building Double C Ranch. From old pains, he created a new life, simple, honest, and complete. Leo's story reminds us that happiness doesn't come from the past, but from how we choose to live today. What do you think about Leo's journey and the brave choice he made? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel to continue exploring inspiring stories about love, family, and new beginnings.